And I felt as though he had a purpose for me. And when I started to examine or reach for what that purpose was, I felt I needed to write again. And so Daydreamers, which is the later book, became became a thought. And even if you're not from Jamaica, you would find it an interesting novel to read, even if you had no understanding that this was based on historical events. So it led me to write Daydreamers, which is a story about the events leading up to the 1976 elections in Jamaica, where we saw a sudden surge in violence in the island. Beginning of COVID, I caught COVID early March 2020. I got very, very sick. I almost passed away, almost died.
10
I think
weeks,
this
right?
was,
You were down 10 weeks?
I was down for 10 weeks, yep.
Yeah.
And so I think by the grace of God, so my father picked me up from school, and I knew something was up when he picked me up from school because he doesn't normally pick me up from school. And he told me that the results for the exams had come in,
Mhm.
and I didn't know what to think. So I waited for him to speak, and then he said I failed.
Did you know there's a technology that's actually an app on your phone that uses sound waves to tell your brain what you want your brain to do? We had a young man that was on a guest on our podcast, the Mike Litton Experience, who had a traumatic brain injury. He was sleeping 3 hours a night. He's using Newcalm now and he's sleeping more. Go to newcalm.com, Mike15 promo code. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience podcast. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. Mike is passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
Gary Hamilton, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. Like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go up to today, and then we want to talk about this new book you have out called Daydreamers. It's a novel, right? Thanks again for
That's
being
right.
here.
Thank you very much for having me, Mike. I'm very excited to be here. Yes, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
And you're in the UK right now, right?
That's right. I live in the UK currently. I was born in Actually, no. Ah. I was born in England, but I grew
Okay.
up in Jamaica. So I lived in England until I was 9.
Mm-hmm.
And at the age of 9, my parents were told that I had no academic future and that they should start planning for me to go to a trade school or something of that nature. And my parents refused to accept that that viewpoint. So that was one of the primary reasons why we left England and went to Jamaica for my education.
Wow. Wow, what a thing to tell your parents
And at the age of 9, can you
at the age
imagine?
of 9. Yeah. Wow. So you end up leaving, you go to Jamaica. So did you finish high school in Jamaica?
So I started, well, at the age of 9, there's still primary. In
Yeah,
the Jamaican school system is similar to the UK. So up to the age of 11, we go to primary school.
gotcha.
And so I had 2 years left of primary school. And at the age of 11, we take an entrance exam to determine what type of high school you go to, and also whether you can choose which high school you want to go to. You get the preference of listing 3 high schools as your first, second, and third choices. And depending on how well you do in that exam, you get your first choice or your second choice or your third choice, or the government places you in a school near to where you live. So those 2 years were really, really hard because when I left England and went to Jamaica, the kids in Jamaica were so far ahead of where I was.
Oh, wow.
They were doing things in school I had never seen before in both
Right.
maths and English and other subjects that they were doing. So the practice in Jamaica is that uh, you get homework every day, and on
Mhm.
the weekend you get extra homework. Now in England, you don't get homework. You might get homework on the weekend, but certainly not that volume of homework that we got in Jamaica. So, especially for the weekend homework, where you get not just the regular homework, but you get additional homework, I just either didn't want to do it or couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So every Monday morning, when you had to hand in your exercise books with your homework in it, my exercise books were incomplete, and therefore I got caning every Monday morning,
Mm.
and it was really hard. But and it sounds wicked, especially in this current climate where corporal punishment is not allowed in schools.
Mm.
But it inspired me, or it drove me to be a student, a good student, and so much so that when I eventually took that 11 plus exam, I got the highest mark in mathematics in the island,
Awesome.
and
Good job.
I got, yep, and I got 2 points short in my English of being offered what's called a government scholarship in Jamaica, where the government pays for your tuition throughout high school. So, so I just fell short of that, and that's how well I did in just 2 years, from not being able to do the homework, not being able to do the work, to being one of the best students in the island, having taken my common entrance and getting my first choice, high school choice. So it was tough, and you could say it's tough love. So I'm very, very thankful for that, although I wouldn't want to go through the experience again. But it did me good. It put me on the right path. It gave me the right opportunities, and my whole educational foundation was dependent on that.
And it really was tough love, right? I mean,
Yes.
wow. Wow. So you had Monday morning pain, basically,
Yes, every
every
Monday
Monday.
morning. Yeah, and I couldn't
So
tell my parents, because if I went home and told my parents, I get um, uh, another uh,
on top of it,
yeah, on top of it, I would get
right?
another adjustment, discipline adjustment.
So now that you're an adult, do you like Mondays?
Yeah, I'm fine. I have recovered from the experience, and it has helped in. I have two daughters, and
Yeah.
in talking to them about my youth experience, it's helped me to get that off my chest, and to recover from that. They're in shock and horror that such things could happen in school.
Mm.
But they were outstanding students, my two daughters. I wish I had their talents, but yeah, I think I'm fine.
Awesome. That's awesome. So going through those 2 years, it sounds like that was sort of a pivotal time in your life.
Yes, I would
What did
agree with
it
that.
teach you about you?
What did it teach me? Wow. Ooh. One of the things my mother always said to me is, just because it's hard doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. And there are two sides to that coin. One is that it teaches you to push through the difficulties that you encounter in life. So that's a positive, and that's been a hallmark, I think, of everything I've done. When things have gotten hard, I tend to get calmer, and my whole career has been about solving problems, and usually they're difficult, gnarly problems no one else is able to solve, and I'm able to calm everybody down in the room, and push forward towards a solution. And I think that comes out of that advice from my mother, and probably the experience I had in primary school. The negative side of that coin is that you probably don't know when to stop, when to say enough is enough, when this is not what you're supposed to do, and that's something. And also being able to say no instead of constantly saying yes. So I'm learning that in my later years, as to is a, when is a good time to say no. I can't add that on top of what I'm already doing. It's pushing me too far. I'm carrying too heavy a burden.
Um,
So I think those are probably the lessons I learned from that experience.
so can I ask you a question about that time?
Mhm.
Since that time, how has everything else in your life compared? less painful, less challenging, less stressful, right?
That's an interesting question. I don't remember it being. Hmm. So I do remember that high school and university were far more enjoyable experiences than primary school.
Mhm.
And there was always, now that I think back about it, there was always this trepidation on a Sunday in anticipation of what was going to happen on Monday.
Mhm.
I didn't experience that. I don't remember experiencing that in high school, and I certainly don't remember experiencing that in university. Um, so, so that was probably emotionally a very difficult time for me. Um, Thinking back to how I viewed Mondays or Sunday evenings, um, comparing it through the different stages of my life. Um, but So yes, I think that's fair. I mean, as I said, my career, my technical career, because I guess I've had two careers. One is in the technical world, and one is in the uh, creative world.
Mhm.
Um, I've always had a job where, as I said, I solve difficult problems, and I'm put on teams where if the normal processes and the regular teams can't solve it, then give it to this team and they'll figure it out.
Mhm.
And those were always high pressure. Um, as long as it work until it gets solved, it should have been solved yesterday. Um, th- th- you know, if you have to work 24 hours, and so be it, just get it done. And there were some dicey moments going through that, working with very large corporations where there's lawsuits possibly being threatened, and on if we can't solve it by a particular time and that type of thing. But I seem to have thrived in those environments versus it being a burden. And maybe because of what I experienced when I was younger, it prepared me for that. But takes its toll over time. You can't work under constant pressure all the time. The
Right.
body isn't designed for that.
Yeah, I totally agree. It seems like that 2 years was a real pivotal moment in your
Yeah,
life. And I
I think
wanted to
so.
see how you feel now that you've sort of come through that, right? Like how that affected you in both a positive and also potentially a challenging way.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, until I started to prepare for um, to, ha, many interviews I've had have focused on over the last 10 years. This is not recent, because in the work environment, they've tried to address mental health issues
Mhm.
and ask people to open up about the challenges they've had. And I've had opportunities to speak about my childhood and my and later years. And um, in the process of doing that, I've had to think back to those
Mhm.
days, and before then, prior to then, I didn't really think about it.
Mhm.
Maybe it was a protection system that I had, but I hadn't really given it much thought until I had to start talking about it, and and I see the benefits, but I can also see there are probably scars, and I've tried to work through through those. So yeah.
So at the end of this 2 years, when you took the tests and you did as well as you did on the tests, how
Mhm.
did you feel?
It was awesome, and actually, so my father picked me up from school, and I knew something was up when he picked me up from school, because he doesn't normally pick me up from school. And he told me that the results for the exams had come in,
Mhm.
and I didn't know what to think. So I waited for him to speak, and then he said I failed. And I thought, oh my gosh, no, my, what am I going to do now?
Mhm.
And then he says, oh, no, no, I was joking. You passed. so, so it was just relief at that
Of
point
all the
because,
times for him to joke, right? Oh my goodness.
yeah, it was just
Wow.
relief because, yeah. And it wasn't until sometime after when the school got the details from from the government that I knew how well I did. But yeah, initially it was just relief because he told me I failed. So the fact that I didn't fail was great.
So when you look back, you have to have some pride and feeling of accomplishment from all that.
Yeah, yeah, I do, and I'm a lot of gratitude
Yeah.
to the school. The value add. I mean, in I think in all school systems you have ways of rating schools or grading schools. So parents who are looking to put their children in schools can try and figure out which are the best schools they want their children to go to.
Right.
And one of the ways of grading schools in Jamaica has been not just Jamaica, it happens here in England also,
Hmm.
is looking at exam results at a particular point in the career of the students. Um, and one of the debates that's happening now in Jamaica is, but what is the value add that that school added? If the school had taken in bright students already and they proved to be bright, then okay, the school did what they're supposed to do, but did they add any value?
Right.
And then there are schools who take students who were refused by many schools, and they built up those students so that those students then became successful, but maybe not as successful as the students who were bright already.
Mhm.
But students have built up confidence and have the right attitude and have built up the right skill sets to go on and become successful and good citizens and good contributors to society. So it's an interesting debate as to um, how do you grade a school? Is it value add or is it just how well the students did at the end of their career? And in the case of my primary school that I went to, I can say that the value add was enormous because I don't know if I would have done as well if I went to any other school. Maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't, I don't know. But they certainly took me from the bottom to close to the top, and I can't be more thankful for that.
That's cool, man. That's cool. Thanks for delving in there a little bit with me. I
So,
had to ask, right? Because that was such a big that was a big moment in your life. That really was. It was a big time that really was a kind of a pivotal moment. So
yes.
after that, you end up going to your choice of high school, correct?
Yep, absolutely. Yep, I
Okay.
did.
So you go to high school. Did you have a favorite subject in high school?
I like maths. I loved maths actually, and I did very well with maths and physics.
Hmm.
Um, and so those were the subjects I really enjoyed.
Did you have a favorite teacher?
By the time I got to fourth form, fifth form, uh, what year did he take us over? He took us over in, so yeah, so he died last year. His name was Robert Wheeler. He was a maths teacher in, he taught us additional mathematics in fifth form and A-level mathematics in sixth form. There's a funny story associated with him too, where so in Wolmer's, in order to be able to, there's competition to get into certain classes for to take exams.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the competition that I was involved in was to get into the additional mathematics class. And you either took additional mathematics or you took geography. Now, in order to get into that class, you have to do very well in maths in third form. He started additional mathematics in fourth form,
Mm-hmm.
which is so what grade? Yeah, anyway. So I did poorly in mathematics in third form. So I didn't get into the ad maths class. And I took geography for that year. And I hated it. I absolutely hated it. I did not enjoy geography at all. So during the summer holidays between third form and fourth form and fifth form, had a cousin who's a genius. He's fantastic. And I rode my bicycle up to his house every day, and he took me through the entire syllabus for additional mathematics that would have been covered in by the fourth form, um, which wasn't able to take. And on the first day of fifth form, I skipped my geography class, went to the AdMaths class, and went to Mr. Wheeler, and I said, Mr. Wheeler, I'm not registered for this class. I didn't do AdMaths in fourth form, but I'm willing to take a test now to show that I am up with the class or be ahead of the class so that I can take additional mathematics in fifth form. And I'm just asking for an opportunity. So he said, okay, sit down in the class. And he gave the class a test because he didn't teach AdMaths in fourth form of that year. So this was a new class for him. So he wanted to know where the class was. So he gave them an assessment test. So thankfully, so I sat in that, did the test, and I got 100%. And he says, okay, I'll talk to the administrator and have you transferred from geography into AdMaths. Maybe that's one of the reasons why I loved him.
Yeah.
He rescued me from geography.
It sounds like there's a reason for you to love him, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. He was a fantastic teacher. He taught in a way that allowed your mind to open up. He taught you the conventional way to work out a theory or a problem. And then he said to the class, can you find a shorter way to do the same thing? And he gave us the challenge, and then he went up to the blackboard and explained a shortcut, so to speak, which was faster and more effective than the conventional way of working out the same thing. And we used to call it the George. So we looked forward to it. We knew once he taught us a new maths theory that there was a shortcut or a George waiting for us at the end of the week after we got the conventional method down pat. So that was something we all anticipated and looked forward to. And he was consistent in doing that through every year that he taught us. He always taught us the George so that we could find the shorter way to solve a problem than the conventional way of working it out. So he opened our minds.
I love it. That's so cool. It's amazing how a teacher can just impact your life in such a way, you know?
Yep.
So after high school, where do you go?
I went to the University of the West Indies. I guess there's another story with this too. So the University of the West Indies has a minimum requirement for entry. And what they do is that they give a number of points to your grades coming out of O levels and A levels. So I took my A levels and I got the minimum number of points that I needed to get into the university.
Wow.
So I was so happy. So I had borrowed my mother's car that day to go to school to pick up my results. And a friend of mine who lived not far away, he came with me. He also got the minimum number of points. So after we got our results, we said, you know what, we better hurry to get up to the university and register, because if there are more people with better point totals than us, we might not get in.
Right.
So we raced up to the university and registered immediately so we could get in, which we did. So that I got into University of the West Indies. I was there for 3 years. I did a double major in electronics and computer science, and loved it. And that's where I also met my wife.
Oh, that's cool. So what was your favorite thing about going to college there, other than meeting your wife?
I was actually going to say meeting my wife.
What was number two?
So university life is fantastic. So I went to, my high school was a boys' school. So only boys through 7 years of education. So you can imagine then going to a university which is co-ed, and all these wonderful women are there. And
you're primed and ready, baby.
Yep. Absolutely. And they all want to talk to you. Because in high school, there's this almost like a totem pole of respect that you get based on who you walk with and who knows you and what grade you're in and all that type of thing.
Right.
So a girl who was ahead of you in high school in grades would never talk to a
Mhm.
guy who's yeah, that just wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
And so you get to university and everybody's the same. Doesn't
Mhm.
matter, you're all adults. That's one of the first lectures that you get when you get to university. You're adults now. No one's going to look after you. No one's going to tell you to go to class. You're given the curriculum. You're given your exams are going to be. It's up to you to prepare and be ready for that. And that's an eye opener. The first
Mhm.
lecture you get is to tell you you're an adult
Mhm.
and you're responsible for yourself. And that's how everyone treats you. Lecturers treat you that way, and also all the students treat you that way. So it was the camaraderie. Also, University of the West Indies, because it's represents the West Indies. There are people from all over the Caribbean who mix on the campuses, and that's how. So Trinidad and a couple of the other Eastern Caribbean islands have carnival,
Mm.
and so they brought carnival to Jamaica because before then we didn't really have carnival. It wasn't
Mhm.
something that we did in Jamaica. So carnival was like a 2 week party that just
Mhm.
never ended, and it was absolutely fantastic. It's
Mhm.
music, the food, you're up for days without sleep. It was absolutely wonderful. But I mean, there are some downsides to this in that you realize then not long after carnival you have exams, so you
Mhm.
have to now buckle down to studying and preparing for exams. But that was a fantastic experience. Yeah,
That's
wonderful.
cool. So you graduate from University of West Indies. Where do you go from
Yep.
there?
So I was picked up by a US company, National Cash Register, or NCR as they've rebranded
Mhm.
themselves.
Yeah.
I actually got two off job offers from NCR. I was offered because I had a double major.
Mhm.
They offered me two jobs, one in the software engineering department and one in the field engineering department. And that summer, I had done a summer job with the Bank of Jamaica
Mhm.
as a programmer. And I used to fall asleep after lunch every single day. I was so bored.
Mhm.
So when NCR offered me these two jobs, I thought, software engineer, I'm going to do the same thing I was doing at Bank of Jamaica, where I was falling asleep every day, being so bored. Um, and although the software engineering job was more prestigious because you wore a suit and you got paid more,
Mhm.
field engineering was going out and into the field, traveling around the island. And I also had the opportunity to travel around the Caribbean because some of the equipment I worked on, they didn't have engineers in some islands. So I was asked to fly to other islands to work on stuff. Um, I thought, even though I'm being paid less, this is far more fun.
Mhm.
So I decided to take that job, and I started as a field engineer in NCR, and again, I loved that. It was wonderful.
So how long were you with NCR?
There's another story associated with this.
You're kidding. I'll tell you what.
Yeah.
Let's tell that story after this break. We're gonna come right back. And when we do, we're gonna hear your story about how long you were with NCR. We'll be right back.
Okay.
Did you know there's an app that has no side effects that allows you to use sound waves to tell your brain what you want it to do? It's called newcalm.com and it's amazing. It literally uses sound waves. If you want to tell your brain to go to sleep, if you want to tell your brain to recover, if you want to tell your brain to put you in peak physical state, if you want to tell your brain to focus, if you want to tell your brain to take a power nap, you can do all of these things and more with newcalm.com. Go to newcalm.com today, promo code Mike15. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. And we're back. We're with Gary Hamilton, the author of Daydreamers, and we're talking about his life story. And one of the things we're talking about is your career. Before the break, we were talking about your career with NCR. Tell us the story about you working there as a field tech.
Yeah. So with NCR, I was working with them for about 3 years. Let me get the dates right. 95. Yeah, 3 years. About 3 years. And the company did very badly from a sales perspective.
Mm.
So NCR headquarters came down, big meetings, and they decided that NCR Jamaica had to cut headcount because they hadn't hit their numbers.
Mm.
And I was one of the few engineers who worked on particular class of machines. So everyone said, "Oh, you're safe. Don't worry about it," because there was, as you can imagine, lots of rumors: who's going to be let go, who's going to be kept, and so on. So even though I was one of the younger people in the department, they said, "You're safe. Don't worry about it. You're an expert on these machines. No one will be able to skill up quickly enough. So you're cool." And I was made redundant. So after 3 years of work with NCR, I was made redundant. The week after I was made redundant, and actually in the meeting where my manager told me I was made redundant, the first thought that entered my mind was how my cousin in the States was getting married in New York. We were very close. I was supposed to be his best man for his wedding. And my first thought was, how am I going to pay to go to the wedding? Not how am I going to pay a mortgage or or anything like that. But how am I going to pay to go to the wedding? Anyway, the week after being made redundant, they called me. NCR called me and said, "Can you come in to talk to us?" I thought, this is strange. Okay, I went in, and they said, we've had some problems with some customers because there's no one trained on the equipment that you're trained on. So we'd like to ask you to work on the equipment for us." I said, "What? But you made me redundant. Why would I do that?" And they said, "Well, we really need your help." So after much bartering and discussion and stuff, they paid me significantly more than they were paying me before.
Awesome.
As a contractor. Yeah, fantastic.
That's
So
terrific.
I did that. It was wonderful. So I did that for about a year, and then the customers started to say, "Well, hold on, I thought we heard you were let go." And I said, "Yes, I was." And they said, "But so why are we paying NCR to pay you? Why don't we just pay you?"
Right.
And I thought, "Oh, that's
Cut out
a
the
good idea."
middleman.
Yep. So I formed a company, and I ran my own company for 10 years doing what what NCR, and so all of the customers moved from NCR to me. And so I don't know, I guess I worked for NCR for 3 years and then had my own business for 10 years, doing what I was doing for NCR.
That's awesome. So what do you do? So at some point, you make the decision to write a book, and it's a novel,
Yep.
and it's called The Fixer. How did that come about? There are people that are listening to this podcast that are thinking about writing a book, and they're wondering, what was the mindset? What made you decide to do this, and how did you go about getting started?
Yeah. So, all right. So we've reached 10 years after leaving NCR,
Right.
13 years after leaving university.
Correct.
I get recruited to come to England. I work for IBM for uh, 18 years.
Yeah.
And towards the end of those 18 years, I was going through a bad period. And I was having a conversation with a friend. And she said to me, it sounds like you should be writing a book. And I honestly don't remember what the conversation was, but I just remember her telling me this.
Right.
And so she said, "Why don't you do a writing course, a creative writing course, to see if it's something that you really want to do?" So I thought, well, I guess that's not a bad idea. So I did 2 writing courses. I did a 1-term writing course, which was for 3 months, which I enjoyed. And then I did a 1-year writing course, which was towards a degree, credits towards a degree, which I also enjoyed. And towards the end of the 1-year course, my lecturer said she expects to see my books in the bookstore before long. And that was just, amazing that she should say that. So then I started to think about what I could write about. And around that time, I had a bad experience with in traveling. So I used to, one of my job responsibilities was to speak at conferences.
Mhm.
And I was invited to a conference in, um, I can't remember which town it was, somewhere south of France. And uh, I was still traveling on my British passport that I had. Um, and I didn't have a Jamaican passport at that time. And because it was an older passport, it didn't have the biometric information that the newer passports had.
Mhm.
And it looks like the French custom immigration officer thought it was a fake passport. So they held me in the airport for 3 hours,
Hmm.
questioning me and trying to prove that my passport was fake. And when they were unable to find any evidence of me being not being who I said I was and that my passport wasn't real, they let me go.
Hmm.
And so that experience stayed with me. And that experience became the nutshell of a story, which became The Fixer.
Wow.
Um, and which isn't about that, but there is inside The Fixer that there is a scene which is similar to my experience. Um, so uh, so that was, and for anyone who's written book, who's trying to write a book or has written books, one of the interesting things about writing stories is that sometimes a single scene, a single thought, a single idea becomes uh, a seed
Mhm.
which blossoms into a story. And very often you don't know what the story will look like, but this seed is it germinates and it grows and it builds and it builds. So that was the experience I had with The Fixer, where that experience became that seed
Hmm.
and it germinated into a story, which became The Fixer.
So
And
you
that was
sit
30,
down,
that was 13 years ago.
so you
Mhm.
have this seed and you
Yep.
sit down and you start writing. And then does it
Mhm.
just kind of take on a life of its own? Like, does it just start flowing and it becomes this much, much larger thing?
So for The Fixer, it did. And my writing style has actually changed since then. So
Okay.
yes, The Fixer started with this seed, it germinated, it grew branches, it grew leaves, it
Mhm.
it just went, and it went where I didn't expect it to go, and the characters dragged it along. Since then, and I self-published that book. Self-publishing requires self-promotion, heavy self-promotion, which I absolutely don't like. So it didn't do well. I shelved it. And then beginning of COVID, I caught COVID early March 2020. I got very, very sick. I almost passed away, almost died.
10
I think
weeks, right? You were down 10 weeks?
I was down for 10 weeks, yep.
Yeah.
And so I think by the grace of God, I was saved, and I felt as though He had a purpose for me. And when I started to examine or reach for what that purpose was, I felt I needed to write again. And so Daydreamers, which is the later book, became became a thought. And in preparation for writing Daydreamers, I decided the 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 seed germination, tree growing all over the place approach didn't sit too well with me. So I
Hmm.
did a couple more writing courses, and one of the instructors for one of the writing courses passed on a technique which I've developed now, which is to write an outline of the story.
Mhm.
Uh, what and then from the outline write chapter by chapter, break the outline down into chapters, even if it's one sentence, from start to finish, and then iterate through that until you have your book.
Mhm.
And you still have the opportunity for the story to go off in different directions, the characters to take you where they want to. But with the outline, you have a framework that you're working within now, and that gives you more control, and it has more structure, and I think it produces a better more discipline, and therefore it produces a better story.
So at some point you decide to write a book called Daydreamer.
Yep.
Talk about that for a second. What was it that caused you to begin to write the book? What was it that was the inspiration for it?
So Daydreamers, as I said, came out of my experience with COVID. And uh, when I was recovering from my experience with COVID, Psalm 8 was a passage that just kept ringing in my head. And the part of Psalm 8 is where it says that, who is man that you should care for him, the son of man that you should look after him.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt as though that was a question I was throwing back at God. Why me? Because at that time, 1,000 people a day were dying in England.
Yeah.
And I survived. Why me? What was it about me that you thought was
so kind of a survivor's guilt kind of thing?
I guess it was.
Right.
And in doing that analysis, I started to think about, as I said, thought of writing came into my head. And I realized that I wanted to write stories which helped us as Jamaicans to ask questions about who we are.
Mm-hmm.
Who are we? Why did we get to where we are? And then I realized that there were very few books or literary accounts about our recent history. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of books about slavery, and our genesis from that, but not much about our recent history. So then I realized I wanted to not write a history book, but write a book that was based on recent historical events that ordinary people would read because it's just a novel.
Right.
And even if you're not from Jamaica, you would find it an interesting novel to read, even if you had no understanding that this was based on historical events. So it led me to write Daydreamers, which is a story about the events leading up to the 1976 elections in Jamaica, where we saw a sudden surge in violence in the island. And we didn't understand why we had all this violence and where all these guns were coming from. In addition to that, we had a strong rivalry between the two political parties fighting for power. And there's still a lot of people alive today who lived through that. Mm-hmm. So I decided when I was writing Daydreamers not to write it in Jamaica, because I didn't want to stir up the emotions the strong emotions that people have related to that period of time. Mm-hmm. But instead I placed it in an island called Asiamaj, which is an anagram of Jamaica. And therefore it gives me some literary poetic license to be able to describe the events that my feature family experiences at that time with the violence, and but not necessarily be held to the specifics of what happened. And also with each of these events, we don't know why it happened. We don't know who did it because no one's been held accountable. So I can now play with that to conjure up a story that readers will enjoy about, and also explain the effects that this violence can have. And then the title Daydreamers comes from the fact that as a child, I loved to daydream. Yeah. One of my favorite memories in Jamaica is walking home from school. There's a guy on the street who would sell sugarcane. So I would buy the longest stem of sugarcane I could find in his cart, and he would chop it up for me and put it in a bag. I'd take it home. After doing my homework, I would lie on the grass at the back of my house and just eat sugarcane and watch the clouds fly over and just daydream. And it was a beautiful experience and a beautiful memory. Yeah. And then I realized I hadn't done any daydreaming for years, decades, in fact. And so I started to play with the idea, why hadn't I daydreamed? And then what happens if daydreams become reality? And how can dreams affect our reality? So there are two characters in the book the patriarch of the family,
Hmm.
David, and one of his grandsons, who have this gift of being able to use daydreams to see things that are happening around them that other people can't see, and experience things that other people can't see, or feel. And they form this connection, and then they have to decide if they should, how do they use this
Hmm.
gifting to be able to save their family from all this violence,
Hmm.
and can they also use this gifting to save their island
Yeah.
from this violence that has erupted in the country.
So what's the number one thing that you learned writing Daydreamers?
Wow, number one thing I learned. So there's a beautiful, I kind of intimated to this earlier.
Hmm.
I had this beautiful experience while writing Daydreamers, where the characters took me to places I didn't expect.
Hmm.
And I didn't experience that in the first writing of The Fixer.
Hmm.
In the revised version of The Fixer I did, but in the original version I didn't. While with Daydreamers, the characters took me places I didn't expect. And that
Hmm.
was a wonderful experience. And it also helped me in one of my objectives, because I have a very, very good friend. She's an avid reader, and we used to exchange books when we were teenagers.
Hmm.
And I didn't know, she told me this a few years ago, that one of her methods, I was wondering, how did she finish books so fast? Because I'm
Hmm.
still reading a book and she's finished the book and she's on to the next. And she says one of her techniques is to read the first chapter, maybe the second, then the last chapter. And if she can connect the dots, she's not reading the rest of the book, because the book can't be interesting if she can just read 3 chapters and know what the whole book is going to be about. So
Interesting.
yeah.
Did that
So
affect how you wrote Daydreamers?
so when I was writing Daydreams, I thought about her. I said,
Yeah,
have to make sure that she doesn't read the first chapter and the
that's
last
right.
chapter
That's right.
and put down the book.
We're rigging this thing, baby. I love it. I
so
love it.
so it made me start to think of how can I layer this story
I'm going to
so to
make her read
engage.
every chapter.
Absolutely.
Nothing like a mission, right? Nothing like having a mission.
Yep. And
That's
therefore, with
awesome.
the characters taking me in places I didn't expect,
Yeah.
and if I'm the author and I didn't expect it to go in that direction, then there's no way she could predict this.
Right.
So that whole interaction between me and my characters, and also being able to layer it so my friend can read it and stay engaged from start to
Mhm.
finish. That was really, really enjoyable, and a wonderful lesson about creativity, which in the technical world, we are creative in solving problems because
Mhm.
that's what we do.
Mhm.
But it's a completely different type of creativity in writing a book, and I really loved that experience.
So, what's the number one thing that you want the reader to take away from Daydreamers?
Yeah. So I hadn't thought about this while reading it, but I've been asked this question a few times, so I've had to think about it.
Hmm.
And so Daydreamers, I think what I'd like people to take from it is the um the power of hope and love. If we lose hope, then we lose everything.
Hmm.
And it's important to be able to instill hope, or to give people hope so that they can push through the difficult times and get to the end. And also the power of love. The family, my feature family, is being torn apart throughout the book,
Mm.
and it tests the love that they have for each other,
Hmm.
and and love can overcome those difficult times. So I think those are the two things I'd like people to get from the book: the power of love and the power of hope.
Beautiful. Gary Hamilton, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. Now, people can get Daydreamers on Amazon. Is there any place else they can go?
So they can go to my website, GaryRHamiltonBooks.com.
Okay.
On there, I have not just where you can get the book from, which is you can get it from Barnes and Noble,
Okay.
or from the publishers for the books. I have two publishers. One is Austin Macaulay Publishers, and the other one is City of Books.
Hmm.
Um, but on my website, GaryRHamiltonBooks.com, I also have a page dedicated to the history that the book is based on, so people can get details of some of the events that I have in the book. Not every event in the book is real. Some of it is fabricated. It is a novel,
Yeah.
but there are some events which those of us who lived through it recognize those events. And if people are interested, they can go to the website and they can find references to those events and historical information. If they're history buffs and like to know what happened and why. Well, not why, because we don't know why it happened, but a report of what happened, and then see how I have related those events in Daydreamers.
So GaryRHamiltonBooks.com.
That's right.
Got it. Thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you very much. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Can I ask you a question? Did you know that there's a technology that uses sound waves that'll tell your brain what to do? There literally is. It's called newcalm.com. It can tell your brain to heal, tell your brain to sleep, tell your brain to do all kinds of things. It can get you fired up. It can be a pre-workout. Newcalm.com. And the promo code is Mike15. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at the Mike Litton Experience.